Oh,
Thanks, Veronica.
you're welcome.
All right, so Veronica, we're going to cover are we going to go straight to the governance live demo, or what's the next slide?
No, we're
trying to-
actually going to go into Nova. Oh,
Okay.
excuse me. You can cover the slide and then we're going to go into Nova as you're going into each of them.
Okay, so just a reminder with the governance document, as you know, for those of you who were around back in 2015-16 program year, we required each consortia to submit a governance document. There were about, I don't know, 15 or 16 questions you had to answer, and it was signed by all the members. It was before we had electronic signature, so you had to upload it to Nova in the document box. And so that was all based on, a lot of it was based on the Ed Code 84905, which covers decision-making, membership, public meetings, public input, those kind of things. And so starting this year, those governance questions will remain the same. We added a couple extra ones on carryover and bylaws, but you'll have to certify those questions every year. And so not to say that you'll have to change it every year, because your governance might stay the same, but you do have to certify, have each member certify it and approve it and submit it through Nova to the state as your governance structure, so we know how things are working in your consortia. And then if there are any changes, you would note that in the governance document. And I don't know if anybody had any questions, but we're going to move along. Okay, so Veronica, do you just want to show people how, just walk them through how you get to the governance document?
Yes, I can. So you'll log in using your email address and password for Nova. I'm in the sandbox version just to protect people's data, but you would log into the regular Nova site and enter in your email and password. Then you will click on programs, programs, CAEP, then consortia and members. And my system is taking a little while to think. Okay, and then you will search for your consortium, or you can select the consortium name. So I'm just going to go with Allen Hancock since they are first on our list. You would scroll down on your main consortium page, and the CFAD section is the third section on this particular page. So you'll click on this link here and the CFAD will appear. So we'll go through these other pieces in a little while. Right now, we'll cover the governance section. So you just click on this section here and we'll go over here.
All right, thank you, Veronica. So I'm just going to quickly go through these questions in order to give us time for if anybody has any follow-up questions, or to get to the other topics and the three-year plan, of course. So the first question is, have all the members that wanted to join, I won't read them verbatim, been allowed to join the consortia as a member. So if for some reason you had a member that wanted to join and they weren't allowed to, we just want to make sure if that was no, then you should respond what happened, what was the instance. I don't think that's likely. I mean, there could be, I know we have charter schools that sometimes want to join, so that's a little sketchy as far as who's affiliated with the charter, what district is overseeing that charter. So there could be a few instances out there that you might answer no, but for the most part, I think everyone would answer yes on this one. So the next question, have all members committed to reporting any funds available to that member for the purpose of education services? So this is part of that program area report. And this is part of Ed Code where you're supposed to report I think that we have like 5 or 6 fund sources we list in the Ed Code that you're supposed to share and report out to your fellow members. And so we do that through the program area report. The draft is due September 1st. The final is due December 1st. And so hopefully all your members are sharing that. You're filling out the program area report correctly. And you would say yes. If there were some problems, you would say no. Okay, the next question would be how, and then if it was no, you would have to explain why. Thanks, Veronica. And then the next question, question 3, how will the available funds be reported and evaluated? Now that's a question on the 3-year plan under the fund evaluation. If you didn't notice, this is also something, process that you go through during the CFAD when you make allocation decisions. And you also have your assurances in the CFAD that talk about funds being reported and evaluated. So this connects a lot of loose ends that are in code and in our processes. And so you would explain that. Then the next question, question 4, how do you assure that the member is represented by an official designated by the governing board of the member? So we had problems with this in the beginning where people would have to go back to their district. Oh, I'm not the decision maker. And so in Ed Code, it states the district has to appoint someone to make that decision at the consortium meeting. And all decisions at these meetings are final, meaning that it doesn't have to go back to the district's governing board, that this official representative designated by the governing board of the district makes those decisions. And so that decision is final. And so we wanted to make sure, because this was an issue in the past, how are you making sure you have that official designee? Sometimes people leave and then you don't have a designee. So how are you filling that in time to have that representation? What's the process? So things like that would be covered in question number 4. And then on to number 5, how will you assure that each member of the consortium participates in any decision? If you could just scroll down for a second, I want to read. Made by the consortium. So sometimes in the past, we had members that weren't showing up. And so part of the assurances and the Ed Code is that official representative has to participate in the decision making. And so if they're not showing up to meetings, then that could be grounds for an ineffective member and a reduction of funds. There might also be additional bylaws that you use to make sure members are participating. And then I'll pause there. I think I saw a question. Let's see. Okay, we had a few questions. For question 1, is the time period within the past year or any year past? Oh, that would be, I think, in the past year, because we're doing this annually. So this would be in the past year. So this is kind of like an annual update. So we don't want to go back like 6 years if you had something that happened in 2017 or something. We just want to revisit the past year because this is an annual update. And then Janae says, is this representation the voting member of the consortium? Yeah, the official designated member is the voting member, or however you make your decisions. If that's a voting, and we'll get into that in the next question, but that would be that official representative. Okay, let's go on to question 6. This is a good one. What will be the relative voting power of each member? So I think LA Consortia did a nice little study around the state to determine how that varies. And I think for the most part, people have 1 member, 1 vote. Then there are a few that have, they give various votes to different districts with, multiple votes. And then there are some other models, not a lot, but for the most part, it's 1 member, 1 vote. And so we would look to, if you did put other, what is that voting structure or voting power of each member. You would explain that in the text box. Okay, next question. Okay, how will decisions be approved? So that's how your decision-making process is. And we gave a few choices there. Other, of course, if it didn't meet one of the choices listed, you would put that in the box. Okay, and then how did you arrive at the decision-making model? So just explaining, how you determine whether it was consensus or majority, or how did you go about and make that decision and arrive at that process or arrive at that decision? And then the 9th question, how will proposed decisions be considered an open, properly noticed public meeting? So that pertains to the Ed Code about public meetings. And so you would list your process for public meetings and noticing and publicizing. And then the follow-up question to that is number 10, how will you provide the public with adequate notice? So these are all things that districts go through with their public meetings. So this shouldn't be no surprises here, but it is listed in the Ed Code for the adult education program and the funding. And this is part of your assurances when you sign the CFAD, you're certifying that you're doing all this. And so this gives you a chance to describe how you're meeting those assurances and meeting Ed Code. And then the 11th question is how you're going to distribute comments made by the public. And then the 12th one, let's see, I got a pop-up box here. I'll just wait. If you could scroll up just a little bit. Describe the process. Oh, the other way. Sorry. Describe the process by which consortium will solicit and consider comments and input regarding decisions from other entities. And this was added on Ed Code. This originally wasn't there in the original governance document. And then I think the legislature added the part that's not bolded, but it lists a whole variety of education service providers that should be involved in that public comment. And so that is part of question 12. And then going on to 13, how will you determine approval of the distribution schedule? And so that is part of that CFAD allocation process. So how did you, come to an agreement on, although we have Ed Code that says you get no less than the prior year, but if there are some decisions made about, a consortia pot, or if a member says, I don't want to do this anymore, or I can't, and you have to reallocate funds, or you have some bylaw that allows to reallocate carryover, this would, you could put that process in here. How did you determine to come up with the approval of the distribution schedule? And you could put that in number 13. And then going on to 14, has the consortia, and this is the fiscal agent question. So you would answer whether you have a fiscal agent or whether you have a direct funded. And you would just choose one or the other. And then 15 is kind of a new one we added because we did have members leaving and joining. So you would put your process in there of how do you bring on new members? How do members leave? What's that process? I don't think we've had anybody dismiss a member, but that could definitely be a process as well with the ineffective member if they're not following the assurances and things like that. And then 16 is related to the carryover. How does the consortia monitor and administer carryover funds? And then 17 would be any bylaws around the governance for that carryover situation. And so you might have bylaws in addition to the state Ed Code and the state guidance. And I think we do have several consortia that have that. So let's go on to the next question. This is a big one we've added. How does your consortia define effectiveness? So you might have kind of discussed this already. So we'd like to know how you determine effectiveness. Is it just following the assurances that you certify? Or is there something else? Are you looking at your data? Is there other factors that you use to determine that? And then the number 19 is what bylaws does the consortia have addressing member effectiveness? So you might have put that into a bylaw or some kind of MOU or governance document, and we'd like to know what that looks like or what formal language that you have that addresses member effectiveness. You might not have anything, but if you do, we'd like to know about it. And then 20 is does the consortia have a formal document detailing its work beyond the questionnaire? And that would be whether you have some kind of document or bylaws or MOU that you have your members sign. We'd like to know if you have that formal document beyond what the state provides as far as guidance. And so I think that's the last one, right, Veronica?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we went through there pretty quick. I'll just see if, what was the, okay, so we have a few questions. So Veronica, Eric's question is not pertaining to the governance questions, right? That's a separate issue, right?
No, it is. So his consortium completed the CFAD, and it sounds like some members approved. Some members have not as of yet. So I need to look at their CFAD in particular to see if they are able to enter in their data and go through the submission process again, or does the programmers have to open up their CFAD so that they're able to complete the governance section and then go through the submission process once more.
Oh, I see.
There's another consortium that's in the same boat too.
So Eric, they went ahead and did their CFAD before we had the governance questions posted. Is that what? Okay.
We jumped the gun, Neil, sorry.
That's okay. Did you have any problems?
No, I mean, we were just in the process. We saw it was live, so we met and we agreed to the distribution and we plugged in our numbers. We should have held off. And I purposely didn't approve mine until after this meeting. And now I realize I should have just had us all wait. So my apologies.
Well, yeah, I think, Veronica, if Eric hasn't approved the certification of the CFAD, then it might be less of a problem if he hasn't certified, right?
No, our financial person, so she submitted. So I do believe it's at the member level now.
Yeah,
Okay.
some members have approved it.
So all we need is maybe someone to reject it. I don't know. Veronica will figure it out with the programmers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's an impossible situation. Okay, so Michelle had a question. If our bylaws have answers to these questions, can we refer to that document or do we need to paste relevant sections in NOVA? So Michelle, what I would do is just paste relevant sections, and then on the questions that ask if you have additional bylaws, you could just refer to that if it's a lengthy document. We don't want all the bylaws cut and pasted there, but you could reference saying that we have, an additional document of bylaws that are available for anybody to look at. And if you want to highlight some of the things that might be interesting for us to look at, you could do that in those text boxes. But by all means, you don't have to list every single one or the whole document. Okay, and Dana has something similar. So just let me see if I answered Dana and Michelle's question. Did I? Michelle or Dana? Yes, okay. And hopefully Michelle. So David has, what questionnaire is being referenced in question 20? Let me see that again. If you could scroll up, Veronica. Oh, so the governance document that we just went through, we call it a questionnaire. So that would be the document we're referring to, David. So that.
Got it. So this itself.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry for the confusion. Okay. Well, we thought that was going to take a lot of time, but
Neil, can I clarify Michelle and Dana's question?
sure.
So we have our bylaws, and so if one of these questions, I'm just going to pick out one. One of the questions is carryover. I can just copy and paste our carryover section of our bylaws. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how does your consortia monitor and administer carryover funds? You could say, our consortia has developed the following bylaws around carryover, and you just cut and paste it in.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, we can always come back to this later if you think of something, but I'll hand it back to Veronica and we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you.
All right, so we'll go back to the PowerPoint and Myra will be covering the CFAD process, including the preliminary allocations. Myra?
Yes, thank you, Veronica and Neil. So I'm just going to touch on a little bit on the CFAD and explain what that is as you're working on that in conjunction with this governance certification. So the Consortium Fiscal Administration Declaration is based on the CAPE preliminary allocations that is released at the end of February each year and is derived from the governor's budget. The CFAD captures members' allocations for each consortium, as well as the consortium's chosen disbursement method. This CFAD consists of 5 main components, which is the fiscal declaration, agencies and the certifiers, member allocations, provides preview prior to submission, and the CFAD is a one-time process that is due once a year on May 2nd. So I'm sure that is on the calendar. Next slide, please. And I also just want to touch on briefly on the governor's proposed budget for 22-23. The fiscal year 22-23 budget will provide the California Adult Education Program with a COLA increase of 5.33% of about $29.9 million, along with the proposed one-time $130 million investment to support healthcare-focused vocational pathways for English language learners. So I'm sure more information and details to come with that. Amounts are subject to change based on the May revise. If we look at the numbers for 21-22, the CAPE allocation was $566 million. The new proposed for 22-23 is up to $596.3 million, a change of about $29.9 million. Next slide, please. And as a reminder, CAPE funds are restricted funds. They were issued under AB 104 legislation and are in Article 9 in the Adult Education Program of the Education Code. CAPE funds are apportionment, they are not a grant, and at this time are not subject to flexibility. CAPE funds are restricted to adults 18 years and older and can only be used within the 7 CAPE approved program areas. They must have CAPE funds must have an approved regional consortium plan specific to K through 12 adult education and community college non-credit programs. Next slide, please. And as a reminder, the CFAD and the governance documents for 2022 are connected to the 3-year plan. The CFAD and the governance documents are to be submitted and approved in NOVA by all consortium members by May 2nd, 2022, and the CFAD must be certified in order to submit and approve the 3-year plan by June 20, 2022, which we'll touch on that in this presentation. Next slide. And I think this is my last slide. So 22-23 allocation process. In February, the release of CAPE preliminary allocations was was done for the 22-23. During this time, March and April, public meetings are taking place to decide allocations, or should be taking place to decide these allocations if not already done. May 2nd, the CFAD is going to be due in Nova with the governance certification, which is what Neil walked us through. In May, we are awaiting the governor's May revise. And in June 20, the final 3-year plans will be due. By July 1st, the state budget is signed by the governor. And in August, the release of CAPE funds per the approved disbursement schedule. So it's a busy time of the year. As we've been mentioning, the CFAD May 2nd and the governance certification. The other big item that the field is currently busy working on is that 3-year plan, and we'll be touching a little bit further on that in this presentation. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so I will go back to Nova so that we can cover the other sections of the 3-year plan, excuse me, the CFAD process. So I'm going to go back to Nova now. And I'm going to go back to the fiscal declaration and start there. That is the first section of the workflow for the CFAD. And so here is where consortia and members have decided upon their disbursement method for the 22-23 program year. So for this consortium, again, I'm in the sandbox and I'm working with the Allen Hancock College Consortium. And so currently they are direct funded. However, the CFAD process, as you all may know, is the one opportunity that the consortium has to change their funding, their disbursement method. So they are direct funded this year, and they could, in theory, change to a fiscal agent for the 2022-23 program year. So we're going to say here that they will continue to be direct funded. And so there's a message here. You kept your consortium's disbursement method of direct funded. If this was not intentional, you have the opportunity to click here and go back to undo. Because remember, this is the only time throughout the year that you're able to change your disbursement method. And so here, the consortium would provide a narrative justifying how the plan allocations are consistent with their annual adult education plan, which is based on the 3-year plan. And so here they would type in their narrative, which is a summary justifying how the allocations are aligned, and the character limit is 3,500. So 3,500 characters, including spaces, etc. And so since they do not have any changes, they would check this box here for no changes. But if there were changes, so let's say they went from a direct funded consortium to a fiscal agent consortium, then they would explain here. So they would use the box below to explain the changes. And so they will provide a description of what changed and why. So for example, they would mention that they changed from direct funded to fiscal agent, and then they will provide some justification as to why they changed that disbursement method. And here's just an example. So changes could include change in fiscal structure, change in fiscal agent, as I just mentioned as the example, change in funding amounts to each member. Those are just some examples that you can have, that you have at your disposal. But again, it's whatever is real, whatever is true for the consortium. And this section has 3,500 character limits as well. So once you have finished this section, you would click next here. And here are where your member agencies and certifiers are listed. So this consortium has 2 agencies. So they have the Allen Hancock Joint Community College District, and then they also have the Lompoc Unified School District. Now here, you can add a certifier. So if there's another member representative for this particular agency, you can add the certifier here. And then here is the one time throughout the program year where you are able to designate a particular agency as non-allocated voting member only. Now, this designation means that the consortium will not be allocating any funds for this particular program year to this agency. However, this agency, because this agency is a part of the consortium, they still will be required to approve certain CAP deliverables. So for example, they would have to sign off on the CFAD, they would have to approve the annual plan, the This agency would have to approve the 3-year plan, and the agency would have to, it's optional for them to submit the program area report. This particular agency would not submit a budget or work plan as well as any of the 4 fiscal reports because they do not receive any allocations. And that's only for the 2022-23 program year, where that would be an option for this particular agency if they become non-allocated voting member only. So again, that's the one time that an agency can switch designations, or if you're adding a new agency, but they are not currently funded, then they would be non-allocated voting member only. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the page. This is also an opportunity to add a member agency. So you were able to add any new member agencies that come on board to the consortium here. So let's say nothing changed here. So we're going to go next. Oh, before I move on, if a member agency is no longer a part of the consortium and everything is closed out, so they no longer have any funds available to them that they are reporting on, they will not be a member of the consortium any longer. Moving forward, you can delete an agency from the consortium. But if an agency, let's say they go from allocated one year to non-allocated this year, but they still have available funds to them, do not remove them from this, from the CFAD, because they are still a voting member, still part of the consortium, still expending funds that they have available to them. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to delete, we're going to go next here. And here are the member allocations. So here is where you divvy up the allocation for the program year. So currently this consortium has $1,855,946 available to the consortium. And so the total CAP funds matches the total remaining funds at this particular time. And so you would just divide the allocation. So I'm going to give $774,807 to Allen Hancock Joint CCD. And remember, this is all hypothetical. These are not their true allocations. So I'm going to give $1,081,139 to Lompoc Unified. So once I've entered in both of the agency's allocations, the CAP funds, total allocated to members and total CAP funds match one another, and total remaining is 0. In order to move forward past this, the total remaining has to be 0. And as you can see in prior years, if you all remember, we've had changes in allocations based on the governor's signed budget. So last year, for example, this consortium received an additional $43,183 as a part of the governor's signed budget. And so that increase will remain on the screen as a positive number, and the consortium completed an allocation amendment to account for those funds last year. And just like in 2020-21, there was a reduction in funds as a part of the governor's signed budget. And so this negative number remains, but the consortium completed an allocation amendment to account for those funds. So if you see these numbers from last year, it's not because the consortium did not do anything or did not complete the CFAD from last year. Just remember, if there is a change in the governor's budget come July 1 of this year, you will see the change in the CFAD. However, the funds, whether it's a reduction or an increase, is accounted for via an allocation amendment. So don't be alarmed when you see that.
Hey, Veronica, this is Neil. There's just a couple of questions in the chat. Somebody direct messaged me with, if they have a member that's not funded, can you go back and show them how to check the non-allocated voting member box? Or is that the appropriate thing to do?
Say, what's the question again?
So if they have a non-CAPE funded program, I mean, a member that's not receiving CAPE funds, but a member, how do you check that box for a non-allocated voting member?
Check it here. And then it's going to say, Allen Hancock cannot become a voting member only as money has been allocated to them. So that's because I completed this section here. So let me go back because I don't want to confuse anyone. So I'm going to, in theory, I'm going to take the funds away from Allen Hancock Joint CCD, and I'm going to give all of the consortium funds to Lompoc Unified. And again, this is all hypothetical for demonstration purposes only. 946. So now we're going to go back to the agencies and certifiers. And so when I click this, it should say that we're changing their status, and it's going to ask me, am I sure I want to change Allen Hancock Joint CCD to become a, excuse me, a voting member only? And I'm going to say, yes, change. So now they are no longer receiving CAP funds beginning with the 2022-23 program year. And then moving forward, since they are still a member of the consortium, they still are voting members, so they vote on consortium decisions. But when it comes to CAP deliverables, excuse me, when it comes to CAP deliverables, they no longer have to complete a budget and work plan. They no longer have to complete the quarterly fiscal reports. The program area report becomes optional for them. So if they're still providing programming and they still have hours of instruction, then they would still complete that particular report. But they would approve the CFAD as a voting member. They will still approve the annual plan as a voting member, the 3-year plan as a voting member. And I believe those are all of the CAP deliverables that if you're a voting member only, that you do have to still approve in NOVA, even though you no longer receive an allocation.
So
Does that
Veronica,
answer the question?
Tim had another question related to that. So does NOVA alert new certifiers once they're added? Is there some process that says like, welcome to NOVA, you are a new member, or we've changed your status? Is there any kind of notification like that?
That part, I'm not sure. I will have to check on that because I'm not sure if they are. I know an individual is notified once they have access to NOVA and they're invited to create a profile. But if a new agency comes on board, will those member representatives be notified from the system? I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. And then Eric had a follow-up question to Tim's question. If a transition is taking place at an agency, do we enter the new admin at this time? So that would be like a change in personnel, I guess.
Yes, if you know who that person is, then yes, you can add them here as a certifier. And then if you add them at this time, if they do not have a NOVA account already, you can invite them here by putting in their name and their first name, last name, and their work email, and then they'll receive notification from NOVA to create their profile. If they are already a member in NOVA, then you would just look for their name here. So enter their name or their email, and it should appear, and then you'll click Add User.
Okay, and then Janae had a question. When you did the hypothetical situation with Lompoc, she said, where did those hypothetical funds come from again?
Okay, so these are their true funds. Let me go back and change this. So these are Lompoc's true funds for the 2022-23 program year. However, the division that I did, so by giving Lompoc Unified the $1,081,139, that's not their true allocation for the year. Neither is this Allen Hancock Joint CCD. That isn't their true allocation for the year. However, here their total allocated to members as well as their total CAP funds, that's their true allocation for the 2022 program year. 2022-23 program year, when the division of the funds is something I created, it's not for their consortium. Does that answer your question?
Janae did have a follow-up question. So, and I think the answer is no. So CAPE is not or maybe it's yes. So CAPE is not auto-populating the distributions.
That is correct. The consortium. So in theory, the primary contact the consortium lead who is entering this information for the CFAD, the members have come together and voted on what the allocations per member would be. And so the consortium lead or the primary contact is entering in those allocations for each of the member agencies who is an allocated member.
All right, and I think those are all our questions
All
for
right.
now.
Okay, so yes, as I was mentioning, so your total allocated to members and total CAP funds have to equal, and then the total remaining has to be 0 in order to move forward to the next section, which is our new governance section. So as Neil has gone through each of these questions, just make sure that the consortium is completing them in its entirety. Each of these characters, excuse me, each of the spaces for the narrative are 2,500. It has a 2,500 character limit as of right now. If that is an issue and individuals are going over that, send TAP an email to let us know, and we'll see what we can do about that. So each of the sections are 2,500 character limits. Make sure you complete each of these in its entirety, and this red line is cleared out. And so you completed this section. Let's say, although it's not completed, but it's just for demonstration purposes. So you've completed your, this is the CFAD summary. So you've completed the fiscal declaration. This consortium will remain direct funded for the 22-23 program year. The allocations have been divided per member agency, and there are 0 funds remaining. And in theory, each of these questions for the governance section have been completed. And now you scroll down and the agencies are listed. So there are 2 agencies for this consortium. And then you get down to your certification and assurances. And so this is where each member will make sure that they have read the certifications and assurances and are very familiar with them. Because again, those are utilized when we're going through the member effectiveness process. And of course, you want to make sure that you are adhering to all of the assurances within the consortium in order for the consortium to run smoothly and effectively. So there are assurances for member and decision-making, public meetings, reporting requirements. And so once you've reviewed all that, the consortium primary contact or lead would press submit here. And of course, I didn't fill in all the steps, so I am unable to submit. Let me go back and just put in some fake data so that you all are able to see step. I'm just going to put in fake data just to remove the reporting requirements. So I've completed this section, this section. I'm just going to put in some fake data here so that I can move past this. Okay. We're going to go 1 member, 1 vote here. We're going to say by majority, 51% here. Yeah. And then put in some more fake data here, more fake data here. Oops, we're going to vote this fake data. Some more fake data in here. Here. 1 second, I'm almost done. All right, so I put in enough data to satisfy NOLA. So I'm gonna go next here. And then again, this is my preview page, everything that we have already gone through. You review the assurances, then we're going to go submit. And so here is our submission screen where by clicking OK, you're affirming that the CFAD is ready to be reviewed by the selected member representatives. If there are any comments that you would like your member representatives to know prior to them receiving this form, then you would enter in your comments here. And if there are no comments, you would press OK. And the submission screen will appear. Each of your member representatives will be notified that the CFAD has been submitted. And in their notification, We will ask them to accept this or not. And here you have awaiting approval. So at this time, no member representatives have approved this. Now, let's say you're approaching the May 2nd deadline to complete this and your members still have not submitted or approved the CFAD. You are able to send them a reminder here, which we definitely encourage you to do, because what happens is, let's say someone forwards another email to another individual, they may log in under someone else's login information, or access the CFAD, excuse me, from someone else's login information. So just use it for each of the member representatives, and do not forward emails from NOVA to other member representatives, just to make sure that the wrong name or the wrong person is on another member representative's or another agency's CFAD approval. What else was I going to say?
Veronica, we did have a quick question. So once those, the governance document is completed and you submit your CFAD, and then you realize that you wanted to update or edit your governance document because it's linked to the CFAD, once you submit it, you can't go back in and change it. Is that correct?
That is correct. You are not able to make changes to the CFAD once it is submitted.
And that includes the governance
And approved.
document.
Yes, that includes the governance.
So you'd have to wait until next year to update it or change it, right?
Correct. Mhm,
Okay, thank you.
mhm. Any other questions?
Just Shannon was following up on Corley's question.
Okay, and how about
Um,
Janae?
Oh,
Was that answered?
yeah, that was answered.
Okay, great.
So if, so Corley, Shannon was just saying, if there are fiscal changes, you can always do an allocation amendment as a way to change the fiscal part, but governance, you'd have to wait till the following year. Because we
Yes.
don't have a governance amendment process,
Yes,
unfortunately.
that is correct. Yes, that
Yeah.
for fiscal, that will be an allocation amendment if you're making changes, one-time changes to the allocations, and for the governance. We are not able to open up the CFAD again to make those changes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That answers that.
All right, great.
Particularly with the 3-year planning and annual plan and whatnot. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, if there are no additional questions regarding the CFAD, I will go ahead and stop sharing and go back to our PowerPoint. All right, so we'll move past all of these slides because we completed the live demo. And next we'll talk about the 3-year plan. So Myra, do you want to provide an update with the alignment of the 3-year plan and the annual plan?
Yes, thank you, Veronica. So I just have a brief update that I wanted to alert you all of, and you should see communication get sent out on this. We are currently working on getting the annual plan link to be made inactive as we work on enhancements in NOVA to be able to align the 3-year plan with the annual plan. So as of hopefully by the end of the day today, the annual plan link will be inactive. And that is to alleviate, some of the work that is going to be done in NOVA. That's going to be taking place in the next month or so. And so in order to avoid any confusion as you are working on your 3-year plan and your annual plan, we're going to make that annual plan link inactive. And our CAPE tab will be sending out communication on these updates as we work on getting these enhancements in NOVA.
All right, any questions about that?
There be guidance on what the new 1-year plan will look like before it's active for us to see?
Yes, that is the goal. The goal is to provide guidance as well as training. Once the 3-year plan and the annual plan for the 2022-23 program year are aligned, we will be providing guidance as well as training before the anticipated submission of the annual plan.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there an estimated date for that? The training and the template guidance?
So there is not at this time because the annual plan is not available yet, but as soon as it is, then we will work around the time for, so as we know more for the completion of the alignment of the 3-year plan and the annual plan, then we'll notify all consortia and members with updates on training, as well as when the template will be available and the submission of the annual plan.
Yeah.
All right, and I see Emma's question. Yes, we will work to get it done as soon as possible. And Neil just followed up with that. All right, so this next part of our time together will be about the 3-year plan. So we just wanted to provide an opportunity for you all who have joined us this afternoon to ask any questions that you may have of the 3-year plan as you all are finishing up that process, still working on it / finishing up the process. If there are any discussion items or any questions, we wanted to provide an opportunity for that discussion. So we are a smaller group, so you could definitely raise your hand and come off mute, or you can continue to type in the chat if there are any questions.
Can we just talk about the activities and outcomes section of the 3-year plan just real quickly? Is the activities and outcomes are related to the consortium level target. So if you picked ELL at the consortium level, and then you're looking at your activities and outcomes, you do a description of maybe something you're going to do at the consortium level to help support the ELL. Is that?
Shannon, this is Neil. I would say the metrics are just to connect. So when you're putting in your activities, you're connecting it to a metric, because all your activities should tie to a metric. But more importantly, it's something that the member is going to do. So what'll happen is, and this ties into the annual plan. So in your consortia 3-year plan, you'll have a whole bunch of activities. And some members will do some of those activities, other members will do other activities. So when you're developing this, you should think about, what are the activities my members are going to do to support the 3-year plan vision, meeting the need, the metrics, the targets, but it should be, specific to that member level, because when they do their annual plan, they're going to be clicking on those activities that best suit that they're going to do for their budget and their work plan. So when they build their budget and work plan, they're going to be clicking on those activities that you put into the 3-year plan that translated into the annual plan, if that makes sense.
It does. So I just want to be clear too. So if we're choosing ELL as the consortium level metric to improve on at the consortium level, but say one of our members doesn't have an ESL program, then we're not obligated to choose one of those optional metrics. But then that member who does not have ESL is semi off the hook putting in any activities or outcomes.
Yeah, so even in the there'll be, even though you selected for the majority of your members, it'll still get selected for that member, but they just put 0 in their targets because they're not participating. Unfortunately, there's not a way to abstain from the optional metrics that gets loaded for everyone. But if that member doesn't have a program or is not participating in that optional metric, then they can just put 0, if that makes sense.
Correct. So I do understand that part. So you put 0. One of our sites doesn't have ESL, so we put 0 for that. But then when we get to that activities and outcomes section, that member will not have to put an activity nor outcome related to the ESL.
Yeah, so what'll happen in the annual plan, just like we've done in previous years, you'll have a menu of activities to select from. And then that member will say, okay, I'm not gonna do the ESL one, but I'm gonna do the one pertaining to professional development and the one pertaining to marketing and the one pertaining to high school diploma. And they'll select those activities. So when you draft those activities, you have to make the details of that activity specific enough so the member will know what they're doing, because that'll drive their budget and their work plan. If that makes sense.
So some of our activities and outcomes in the 3-year plan might not be related to ESL, despite
Right.
not selecting optional metrics either.
Right. I don't know, Veronica, is what I'm saying, does that make sense? I always double check with Veronica on that one.
Yes, it does make sense.
Okay.
Okay.
And Shannon, if you need more help, you can always reach out to TAP and they can do some one-on-one with you if you want more assistance.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the explanation.
So Janae, yeah, each activity is tied to a metric. It's just a question of which members are participating in that metric, if that makes sense. But I mean, if you're doing overall professional development, I mean, you're going to tie to all metrics, right? So don't get too hung up on the activities tied to the metrics. I think that's just a way to frame it, but you still have to write the activity that it makes sense at the member level so they can select it as an activity in their annual plan and their work plan. I don't know, anything to add on that, Veronica, or are there other questions in there?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Emma is asking, if you take out objectives currently in the annual plan, how will you tie in marketing and professional development?
So Veronica, do you have a take on that as far as, I'm just thinking, so if you put something generic as an activity, how would you address tying that back to metrics? Or there's not a way to select all metrics if it's broad enough? How would you suggest that consortia deal with that, dealing with broad activities?
You're talking about broad activities in the annual plan?
Well, so they're in the 3-year plan. Let's say in the 3-year plan, they list things like marketing and professional development, and then they're supposed to tie it to a particular metric, right? Like Shannon was talking about. And Janae was talking about as well. For each activity, you have to select a metric, right?
Right. Well,
So when they're broad enough, how do they go about when those activities are very broad?
So for the activities and outcomes section, they are selecting the objectives, right?
Right.
So in the objectives, they would have described how they are addressing the strategies that they plan to use to support this particular objective. And that would include PD, marketing, et cetera, right? And so when they get to the activities and outcomes section, then they would just identify which objective this particular activity pertains to.
Okay, and then when they write out their specific activity, when we get the annual plan to link, the annual plan would bring in all those activities for them to select from, right? That's how we've done it in the past.
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know if that answers people's questions. So Janae said, but then we might need to choose some optional metrics. So can they tie them to the activities? Correct. So Veronica, when you're choosing optional metrics, are those also tied to the activities just like you showed? So when they select an optional metric, the same, you'll have the same thing that you'll be typing out, right?
Correct. So they're going to take the mandatory and the optional, the mandatory and the optional metrics coming over to this objectives section and identifying the strategies that they would use for the objectives that they are identifying for each of the strategies. Hold on, I'm saying that in the inverse. They will describe the strategies for each of these objectives. So they're aligning the metrics to these objectives, then they're describing the strategies. And then when you get to the activities and outcomes section, that's where you are going into more detail about the specific activities for each of the metric that's tied to an objective. And now you're explaining your activity. Does that make sense?
I don't know if people want to come off mic, might be helpful because it's kind of a detailed conversation in the weeds a little bit. David asks, just confirming in the annual plan, individual sites will have to select activities named in the 3-year plan that we are working on for the year. And I would say that is correct, right, Veronica?
I need to go to the question again.
It's the last one in the chat.
Okay. In the annual plan, individual sites will have to select activities named in the 3-year plan that they are working. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then Janae, if you want to come off mic and explain your metric question.
Yeah, thank you, Neil and Veronica. So when we're looking at the activities section and we scroll down to the bottom of it where we have to choose what metric is tied, right? So that drop-down menu then only will include the metrics and barriers that we have identified in the metrics section of the 3-year plan. Accurate. Is that correct?
I believe so, Veronica.
Ask that question again, Janae. I'm sorry, I'm reading
No,
something else.
That's okay. So when we're in the metrics section of, and we're choosing our barrier and our metrics, either, the consortium level, which is mandatory choosing. And as Shannon's saying, she's choosing the ELL. And that's what our consortium is also choosing. So if we only choose that mandatory metric and we don't choose any of the optional metrics, then when we're creating our activities and we go down to this drop-down menu that you have shown, it will only show the ELL. It won't show any other metrics. So I guess my question is, if we are having activities like sorry, Shannon, to be using but let's just saying she has one consortium member that doesn't have ELL, then how are they going to create activities for that member if they're unable to tie them to a metric or a barrier? So then therefore that leads us to maybe need to choose some optional metrics so that either for members that don't have that consortium level metric, or we have these broader maybe sort of goals that we want to deal with our consortium that aren't necessarily tied to English language learners, right? It seems like we might need to pick some optional metrics. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, you are. So yes,
and I would just add that, so Janae, you have other global metrics that are mandatory. So like the number of enrolled adults or reportable individuals that become participants, that's a global one for every member of your consortia. So it's kind of a catch-all. So if they're serving students, then obviously you could make that their metric. If that's the only one they want to work on, you would at least have that one. And I don't know if Veronica, does the funds spent also show up as in the drop-down as a metric, those mandatory metrics? Would they show up as well in this section? So we have the 2 consortia mandatory metrics,
right?
And we have the 2 member mandatory metrics. So if they didn't do any optional metrics, what would show up in the drop down? Just the mandatory ones?
Yeah, just the student barrier. So the adults served and the adults who become participants, as well as the funds spent, those do not show up here. These are only the barriers and the optional metrics.
Oh, okay. So that's why I see. So since the student barriers are the only mandatory metric at the consortia level, and all you're doing for this one, Janae, would be, you know, are you serving this English language learner population? And you can make whatever you want out of that metric if you want to increase enrollment, increase participant, increase progress. That's up to you on that. It's pretty loosey-goosey on the student barriers. So you could make that as a generic metric for those ones that aren't participating in the optional metrics, if that makes sense. You would have the ability to do that, and activities aligned with that. Does that sound right, Veronica?
Yes.
Just check. Okay. So does that help, Janae and Shannon? Maybe we took a while to get back to your question or around it.
Yes. Yes, but I think what will make it easier for our consortium at least is if we choose the student barrier English language learner and also one optional metric or possibly two, just so that our sites without ESL, we can place an activity in there to link that section that's highlighted right now on Veronica's screen to a student barrier or an optional metric, I should say, because you know, we're coming up with activities and outcomes at every site, but it wouldn't make sense if one of our non-ESL sites put in an activity that wasn't related to ESL, because you have to choose that ELL metric. So I think for our consortium, it's just going to be easier to select probably one more optional metric. So that way everyone's submitting at least one activity and outcome in the 3-year plan, because they're coming up with them. It's just working it into Nova is the difficult part.
Right. And Veronica, I don't know if you know this answer, but Michelle was asking, why aren't the other mandatory metrics like the percentage of funds spent, the reportable individuals to participants, and the enrollment mandatory metrics, why aren't they listed in the drop down? It's just the student barriers and the optional metrics. Any idea why that didn't happen?
No, I don't.
Nova? Okay. So sorry, Michelle, the programming, I'm not sure what happened there. It is logical that it should be there. I don't know why it's not. Maybe Veronica, we could, when you talk to the programmers, you could ask them that was a question back from the field. Because it does make sense that since we're mandating metrics, that they should have the availability of all. And if they're not choosing any optional metrics, they should have the mandatory metrics to choose from, not just the student barriers.
Okay, I'm making a note now.
Okay.
I don't mean to drive everyone crazy, so I apologize, but if you scroll down on the activities and outcomes in that the short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what those mean. Because when we're going over them at the consortium discussions, everyone's thinking of them as short-term goals, but these are actually short-term outcomes. So let's say by December, I'm making up all these numbers. By December 2022, enroll 5 students into a workforce prep program. Of those 5 students, 80% complete a transition outcome. Is that the kind of answer we're looking for here?
I would think so. I mean, you're covering all the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound.
Okay.
So,
Because
yeah.
I think most people kind of think of these short-term goals. So a lot of, when we're going over this, a lot of discussions I hear is like, oh, we'll look at the LMI data and talk with our workforce board in the next 12 months. Well, that's not exactly what we're doing. That's a great goal. That's a great way of doing that, of finding, or, you know, figuring out what you want to do, but that's not an outcome. That's not a CAPE outcome. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I'm on the right track there then.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we're going to learn a lot from the field on this exercise.
And Neil, did you see Emma's question?
Yeah, does Emma want to come off mute and explain? Does she have the ability?
And I know Annabelle has her hand up, so Annabelle, I promised right after this, they'll come to you.
Yeah, we will.
So here's my question, Neil, is currently the way the 3-year is written, it is more of an umbrella of performance metrics, where the annual plan is written about activity and it's written for the activity. Not all of the activity will fall under the objectives of the 3-year plan. And the reason why I say that is because when you talk about like seamless transition, you know, gaps in service, acceleration, in student progress, all of those things, those are real activities where we dedicate money to marketing to be able to address gaps in service. You know, to me, the activity is maybe an adult school will offer GED in Spanish as a way of addressing a gap. It's not really a metric though right now. And so that's where I'm saying is I think there's a misalignment if you change the wording or the objectives that are in the annual plan, because they're not going to align to how we wrote the 3-year. And my concern is when it comes time for the work plan and budget, that verbiage is going to be really difficult for us to select a strategy that we can actually say we're applying funds to. Because in the past, that's what we were told is the strategies in the annual plan align to our budget. So things for marketing, you know, sending out postal mailers, doing radio commercials, all the things that we do are not necessarily in the 3-year because it doesn't apply to a metric.
Yeah, we'll have to see how, like Myra was saying, as they connect the annual plan to the 3-year plan.
But my concern, Neil, and I hate to interrupt you, my concern is always there isn't a director there in your work groups, because if you haven't been a director with this dialogue, it makes it very difficult for others to connect that. And after going through this for the 3rd time, there's a huge disconnect between what you see as a plan and what we see in activity. And that's my concern is you're going to revamp the whole annual plan. We have less than 2 months to be able to understand the new template, get people into these meetings. Again, we're professional cat herders where the minute you pull one, the other walks away. And you have, 8, 10 members that you're trying to get together while they're planning graduations, while we've just done the CFAD at 3-year. There's a lot of activities. So I don't know if this is the right timing to be able to switch out an entire annual plan template and still expect for us to get it done on time when members are gone for the summer. That's my concern is having that availability of folks in the room.
Yeah, I think a couple things there. So number one, hopefully we would have field input before the programmers got to work on this. And then 2, we would, put some time into the guidance and linking the 2. And then 3, giving you guys more time and maybe not insist upon that August 15th date, but giving you more time since, we are changing the process, that we would be more lenient on the due date and give people more time for that.
And remember, because when they come back in August, they're coming back to a lot of people having to go back to in person that they might not be doing right now. So there's going to be a lot of I'm gonna say cognitive overload and stress on everything that's gonna happen in August. And on top of that, to walk into a new annual plan template is going to be very stressful on people. So I just trying to be mindful, again, to not put too much of a burden on a lot of our folks that are just coming back, gonna be coming back on top of a new plan. And that's just my concern, Neil.
Thank you.
I just wanted to chime in, Emma. Thank you. We appreciate you voicing that concern. We really do. And we'll definitely take that into consideration. And any of the concerns that you guys have, please reach out to us. That's the type of information that we need to hear as we plan, as we have these conversations at the table. So we definitely welcome that. And like Neil had mentioned, the annual plan, the enhancements that are going to take place in NOVA are going to incorporate or address some of these challenges that you're experiencing as you try to tie in like some of the metrics from the 3-year plan to the annual plan. So we'll definitely do our best to make sure that we provide enough technical support, webinars, a lot of training, and we hope to bring this concern as well to our leaders in some of these deadlines that we have. So we appreciate you bringing this up, and we'll definitely take this back to our leaders and see what we can do and report back to you guys. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Annabelle.
Yeah, thank you. Just to piggyback off of this conversation, I think part of the concern, and I appreciate what you're saying, Myra, as far as providing us a technical assistance and training, but once the thing is set in the 3-year plan, we're going to be held accountable to that. And so I'm hoping that as we move forward, that there's also flexibility until the 3-year plan and the annual plan are aligned. So I wanted to mention that. But part of my question, let me open up my, I'm going to be looking at my NOVA while I ask this. So back at the key barriers and metrics, we were kind of going back and forth in our consortia around which one do we choose. And so we realized that there's around identifying how do our members identify low income and low literacy, and those look really different from between the adult school and the community college, where both the adult school and the community college use ESL enrollment to measure the low literacy. Low income is a little bit different, where at the community, and it took just a lot of just kind of checking in with members and even like with the research department at the college, on the college side, that they report to the chancellor's office low income students that are applying for financial aid and or the California Promise, but that does not pick up all adult learners because it doesn't pick up the low literacy. And so we're choosing both low income and low literacy to try to capture as many adult learners as we possibly can. It feels like the measurement is a little bit easier at the adult school. So, and because the college doesn't use CASAs to measure that, I was thinking that we would have to use that if we chose low literacy, that we would have to use CASAs as the metric, but the college doesn't use it. Anyways, I just wanted to share that it took us a little, it's not as simple as just choosing to a couple of these metrics. So I guess and then these sub areas are choosing the progress, the transition, or how we're measuring success. We're trying to find like the right metric. And I guess just overall, and I've heard us, in some of these other webinars, that these are all optional. And I guess I'm still not fully understanding why they're optional. Because what else would you look at if it's not EFL, if it's not literacy gains, if it's not high school graduation, if it's not earning the post-secondary credentials and the high school diplomas. And so I'm just kind of trying to like step back and understand, if we're already looking at this and we're looking at it through Launchboard, we're doing so much work in data, because beyond Launchboard and TE, we're looking at the college's MIS systems, and we're putting so much like work and effort because these other systems are older, usually, there's a lag. So as we're trying to make sure that we're selecting the right barrier with the right metric and matching the right outcomes and the activities, what is the implication? What is the consequence at the other end? How are we tied to the same platforms of Launchboard and TE to measure all of these metrics? And is this just going to be simply us using Launchboard and TE to track the progress of the metrics, or will there be a different level of data inquiry? I'm not even sure if my question made sense, but I hope you're tracking that.
Okay, I'll respond. So Annabelle, I think what we're seeing with this move to NOVA with the 3-year plan are some growing pains. And I think we're going to have to, and bringing in Launchboard as well. And as we brought in Launchboard, there have been some time lags, and we've discovered that as we've gone through the data. So I think this is all up for improvement and making it better. And so that's why I put in the chat that we hope to involve you guys in this process as we connect, the various processes in NOVA, the 3-year plan, the annual plan, and the work plan and budget. It might be a little clunky right now, but we hope to get the bugs out. The good thing, so that's the downside, but the upside is it's not a performance-based program. So if your performance and your metrics and things like that you're tracking and your targets are not met, it's not going to result in any funding loss. So we'll try to work together to make these plans usable and less work on you guys, but we'd love to hear your input. We'll involve you guys in this process. Because I think the 3-year plan, when it got implemented, it was kind of in a vacuum. I wasn't around, Myra wasn't on board, so there wasn't much field input into that process or the testing. And so I think this is what we're discovering a lot on that stuff. So bear with us as we try to make this more user-friendly and customer-focused. I know that doesn't help right now, but at least
Can I ask a more clear, concrete question maybe?
Sure.
I just had to get that out. So let me ask a more concrete question. So if under the metrics, under the student metrics of progress, transition, and success, we're looking at those now as a consortia, right? And we have Launchboard and TE, and we have MIS. If we don't select these, like I have members, I'm like, oh, they said it was optional. Let's not select any of that. And so I guess it's been a hard sell for me to say, no, we need to continue. We're already looking at this. We need to continue to look at this. And so I think it's just kind of this mixed message. Why wouldn't CAPE want to look at our EFL gains and our transition to post-secondary and earning of credentials and post-secondary degrees. And so I guess that's been a little bit of a mixed message and a little confusing.
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah, well, in the past, I've kind of said, the state sets the bar for the minimum compliance. So the minimum compliance are those mandatory metrics, but we've also made the optional metrics available if you want to take it beyond minimum compliance. And so you have the ability to select this. Now, if you have members that aren't willing to do that, then that's a good time for a conversation at the member level with the official reps to say, hey, shouldn't we be doing this? Why aren't we doing this? And then that's where you get that consensus and maybe you vote on it and you move forward with it rather than, having that one member that doesn't want to do anything. Maybe there's, some discussion that happens that might change their mind, or you have a decision-making process that will allow kind of a voting process to move forward and agree upon selecting a certain metric. So, but the state first go around, we wanted to make it easy to get into this metric process. We didn't want to mandate a lot of stuff. And so maybe the next go around 3-year plan, we'll have worked out all these bugs and have more focused metrics. I'm sure LAO will have some recommendations this year on metrics and incentives and performance, and we'll see what that looks like. And that's something that maybe we'll have to build into this process anyway in the future. So all very incremental at the state level. I know at the local level, you guys like to move a lot faster. So we've given you the ability to move as fast as you want and just meeting the minimum compliance, which isn't that much. So, because we know there's members at the local level that maybe aren't all in agreement. So we didn't want to mandate too much right away, if that makes sense.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, we have John. John, go ahead. We have 2 more minutes.
Thanks. Real quick. This is more of a nuts and bolts question. And I think that because it's not in the guidance, but I think this was sort of intimated, Veronica, that the objectives that we're writing, and it says strategy, so I'm assuming strategy and objective is the same word or same purpose, serving the same purpose. And it says the strategies, and let me see in Nova, the exact wording is, sorry. It is that the described strategies the plan will support to address the educational needs identified in section 2. So are these objectives supposed to address the metrics? Is that correct? Am I understanding that? Or that we're doing objectives that will, so because we have a whole slew of metrics chosen. And so should each objective, I'm trying to see the connection between the metrics and the objective, because the objectives seem to be different than what the metrics are. I'm not making the connection.
Okay, so, okay, I'm off mute. Yeah, so you're talking about what I just said.
Yeah.
When we were talking to Janae and Shannon, I believe. So I did misspeak. So the assessment and the objectives align, and then the metrics and the activities and outcomes align. But when you get to the activities and outcomes, so you are basing your activities and outcomes on the objectives. So you're going to, have your activity name, you're going to select and which objective you are responding to, provide your description, and then the goals or the outcomes. Then down here is where you identify the metric that this particular activity aligns to.
So the metric is not the driver. It should be those 3 objectives: the educational need, what's the other one? I don't know. There's 3 of them.
There's the educational needs,
Yeah,
the improved integration of services and transitions, and the effectiveness of services.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are your drivers.
Okay. So we're looking at assessments. We're trying to create objectives that match the assessments. Then we create activities that match those objectives. And then hopefully those activities move metrics. Did I say that right?
I think you did. And don't get too caught up in the metrics.
Okay.
I think everybody's getting a little too caught up in the metric. I don't think that was the intent. I know when the programmers developed this, they like to use the metrics and every point to kind of point towards that, but it's not something that is driving it. I think those objectives and activities are driving it. And so if you could focus on that, that would be better than trying to come at this from a metric standpoint.
I
Okay.
just wanted to say, Neil, that makes a lot more sense because I think we are getting caught up in it's not the best kind of format. And so I think we're getting
Yeah.
caught up in this circle. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. I think if I
Yeah.
kind of reframe my thinking around those 3 objectives that we've always had and think about what we want to do and how we want to measure it, just like
Yeah.
a logic model. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what we intended, but then somehow someone wanted to introduce the metrics, and then that kind of became a red herring that people followed when we still want to go back to, like you were saying, Annabelle, the objectives and activities like we've done in the past. And that's what I was thinking, that those objectives and activities are going to drive the plan, not necessarily the metrics. The metrics are kind of a byproduct. They're kind of like a nice to have, something like a little dashboard that you're checking on, but not driving the car. Maybe one of those smaller indicators on your dashboard, like a little tiny one in the far right-hand corner where your objectives and activities are a lot bigger. Because those are what's driving your budget and work plan, are those objectives and activities like we've always had. So maybe we can reframe it and refocus like that and kind of put those metrics kind of as a nice to have, something to be mindful of, but don't drive your plan using those. I don't know. Would that make
Right, so
sense,
there-
Veronica?
Yeah, there's one last question from Sherry. She wants to know for these, and I believe this is the section you were referring to, Sherry. Are these numbers duplicated or unduplicated?
The numbers, those are inputted by you, right? Those are not pre-populated, correct, Veronica?
Yeah, these are not pre-populated. Sherry, are you referring to these numbers?
I'm looking at the ones that are in the assessment section where it says regional service providers. If you,
Yeah,
well,
that's-
you're right here. Yeah. So it was pre-populated for me. That's
It
where I'm,
was.
how,
It's not
and I
sup-
thought that came from Launch Board.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be pre-populated. It used to, well, it was supposed to, the original intent was for it to be pre-populated, but these are numbers that the consortium inputs.
So what you could do, Sherry, is I think you could still go in and change those numbers, right? It doesn't
Yes.
prevent you from changing them, does it?
It gives me the ability to change them. However, we lost our data person, so I need to be able to pull these, and not quite sure what I can pull without having to go to each member, because I don't think we have the ability with our manager reports and TE to pull everything we need for this, or is it duplicated? Is it unduplicated? So
Yeah. So what you
Just-
could do, Sherry, is given the magnitude of your consortium, the 22 members, you could just use the launch board data because it's broken out by individual program, and it does take the TE and the COMAS data. And so if you wanted to, you could use the launch board data, and that's already available and for the public. So you wouldn't need passwords and anything like that to go into it.
okay.
So-
It does not have EL Civics broken out separately.
No, it doesn't.
So what do I do
unfortunately.
about that? I would have to just get it from those WIOA members that have EL Civics.
Yeah, but you know what? In this part, you're assessing who's providing what. And I guess you could get an estimate or have them drive reports out of their system to break out EL Civics, I guess, if it's not available.
Okay,
but-
so if I got it from Launch Board, do we still know? I mean, because I could get it from each member probably, but I would need to know if it's do we want duplicated? Do we want unduplicated?
Yeah, that's the thing. So you would have to know what your TopsPro data says versus your COMAS data versus your launch board. The launch board data, does deduplicate. I think the COSTAS data does too, but that's kind of a technical thing that too bad you lost your data person. But since this isn't a critical, we're not going to hold you to these numbers. I think if all members are comfortable with where you're getting the data and you do your best job, and this is for the assessment to show who's offering what kind of services. And so these numbers are to answer that assessment question, not necessarily to do any target setting or goal or metric or setting or anything like that. It's just to kind of assess the need in your region. So you just like to know who's offering what program and how robust it is, or maybe it's small, maybe it's huge, maybe they're the biggest CTE program in the region, that kind of thing. I don't think we want to get specific numbers and audited and that kind of thing. So I think if you're comfortable to know what direction your region's going and who's providing what from maybe a 5,000 foot level, I think that gives you enough information to answer the educational need question in this section, doing the assessment. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I think we had one other question from somebody. I don't know, someone was trying to speak.
No.
Okay, Shannon, so no, this data is not from the program area reporting, because the program area reporting is hours of instruction. So this would be from Launch Board, or if you have access to TE, you could get this from TE. You could also get this from COMIS in Data Mart, but then you'd have to count individual semesters and it could be duplicated count. So, but it's not the program area report. And then any other questions before we sign off? I don't know, did we come full circle on this and help everybody, whoever's on the line? I mean, the explanation of focusing on the objectives and activities and keeping those metrics, as not the driving force. Does that help? Okay, maybe. I don't know, Veronica or Myra, do you guys want to wrap it up?
Yeah, so yeah, that is all that we have. If there are additional questions, please submit them and we will do the best we can to get the answers to you. Yeah, that's all that I have. The evaluation, yes, is posted there. Please complete that. We do have upcoming PD, so check out the register.caladolted.org site to register for those upcoming PD opportunities. Also, please be on the lookout in the newsletter, because that's where we do disseminate a lot of information. And also we will do direct communication, but definitely continue to look at the newsletter, especially as we are working towards this alignment of the 3-year plan and the annual plan. So
Veronica,
that is.
could I ask, maybe we could have one more PLC related to this topic that we covered today in the last half hour. Maybe that could be a good follow-up.
Okay, I'll look into that opportunity.
Okay, I think that would be helpful.
All right. Okay, well, thank you all very much and have a great afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.